these, love came a long way first. With thoughts like these, one can readily understand Keynes becoming an economist. Perhaps more in keeping with Moore, Keynes also married Lydia Lapakova, who had just enchanted London as the star of the Aeolus ballet. Was there ever such a union of beauty and brains as when the lovely Lapakova married John Maynard Keynes? Perhaps it was well that Keynes was in London. Someone in the Cambridge academic community is said to have asked, has Maynard really married a chorus girl? Keynes in these years told of his lifelong interest in the arts, especially the performing arts.
The artist walks where the breath of the spirit blows him. He cannot be told his direction, he doesn't know it himself. But he leads the rest of us into fresh pastures.
I've said that Keynes was kept outside. Experience in these years showed that it might have been safer to have kept him inside. Then there would have been some curb on his words. The man who had most reason to wish for such a restraining hand was Winston Churchill, then Chancellor of the Exchequer. It was Churchill's misfortune in these years to preside over the most dramatically disastrous economic action by a government in modern times. Keynes advertised his error to the world. The mistake was in returning the pound in 1925 to the gold standard at the old golden dollar value of $4.87 to the pound. Had Britain gone back to the pound at, say, $4.40, all would have been well. But with pounds bought at $4.87, British prices were about 10% over the world market. And 10% is 10%. Why would anyone, even Churchill, make such a mistake? The old rate for gold and dollars showed that British financial management was just as solid as in the 19th century. The war had changed nothing. And as an historian and professional custodian of the British past, this was a line of argument to which Churchill was fatally susceptible. And where money is concerned, style, manner, good tailoring, certainty of assertion, and personal assets are very often a substitute for thought. Churchill's speech in the Commons announcing the return to gold was a public triumph. Keynes, in a widely read article, asked why Churchill did such a silly thing. British prices could, of course, come down, but they could come down only if wages came down. And wages could come down in only one of two ways. There could be a horizontal slash, whatever the unions might say, or there could be unemployment. As it developed, there were both unemployment and the wage cut. As the war recovered after 1924, world coal prices fell. To meet this competition with the more expensive pound, the British coal owners proposed longer working hours, no minimum wage, and lower wages for all. The Royal Commission agreed on the lower wage. The miners refused and the owners locked them out. On the 3rd of May, 1926, the transport, printing, iron and steel, electricity and gas workers, and most of the building trades came out in support of the miners. This, with some exaggeration, was called the General Strike. For a fair number of workers, it didn't make much difference. Unemployment, the other remedy, was also being applied. In these years, it ranged from 7 to 9% of the labor force. With the strike, those who had urged the return to gold now deplored the threat to constitutional government. Churchill took a very strong stand for law and order. The general strike was soon over. It lasted only 9 days. For the miners, things were much more grim. They remained on strike through most of 1926, and eventually they were defeated. Keynes was redeemed as a prophet, but not as a statesman. Where men of great importance are wrong, it's very poor personal tactics to be right. The return to gold was meant to proclaim the strength and integrity of sterling. Instead, it demonstrated its weakness and the strength instead of the dollar. The late A.J. Liebling of the New Yorker magazine once formulated what he called Liebling's Law. It holds roughly that if a man of adequately complex mind proceeds in a sufficiently perverse way, he can succeed in kicking himself in his own ass out the door into the street. The return to the gold standard in 1925 was a very good manifestation by the financial experts of Liebling's Law. By 1927, the gold flow to the United States was alarming. Accordingly, in that year, Montague Norman, the head of the Bank of England, and Helmar Horace Greeley Schacht of the Reichsbank sailed for New York to try and get it back. Charles Rist of the Bank de France, he came too. They asked the Federal Reserve to lower its interest rate, expand its loans, and therefore ease monetary policy. The lower interest rate would discourage the flow of money to the United States. The easier money would mean higher prices and so less competition from the U.S. The Americans obliged. This was the action we saw last time that historians believe to have triggered the great stock market speculation of 1927-1929. It gets more credit than it deserves, but it was a mistake. Great events can have a precise point of origin. World War I at Sarajevo. The Great Depression began here at the New York Stock Exchange. In the 1920s, things were bad in Britain, but good in the United States. Good at least for business, corporations, and the affluent. Profits increased, and the stock market boomed. And as in the later boom of the 1960s, there was a rush to get a piece of the new and wonderful technology. RCA radio was a great favorite. So was Seaboard Airline, a foothold in aviation. It was, in fact, a railroad. But the wonder of the age was the investment trusts. These were companies that invested in other companies that then invested in yet other investment companies. The profits and capital gains of many companies then cascaded back to the ultimate organizers. And so did the losses when they came. The investment trusts were the forerunners of the unit trusts or the mutual funds. In finance, many of the greatest inventions are in terminology, a new name for an old idea. If there was a symbol for this speculation, it came in 2 words, Goldman Sachs. There had been nothing like it since the South Sea bubble, and there would be nothing like it again until Investors Overseas Services and Bernie Kornfeld. The show opened on December 4th, 1928. First on December 4th, 1928, the Goldman Sachs Trading Corporation was formed with a 100 million issue of stock, 90% of which was sold to a very eager public. Its function was to buy other stock to the extent of its capital, the closed-end investment.